Rain poured down in Gaborone like the sky itself was crying for her. Amara stood outside her home, completely soaked, one hand clutching her swollen belly. Her husband, Cabello, had just thrown her out in the middle of the storm. His words still rang in her ears, sharp, cruel, and final. "You're a burden, Amara. Go raise that child on your own." Before she could beg or explain, he slammed the door in her face. She pounded on it, screaming his name, but he turned off the lights. The neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering, but no one came forward. Not a single soul. The rain kept falling, washing away her tears but not her pain. Barefoot and trembling, Amara stumbled down the muddy street, her dress clinging to her skin. Every step hurt. Her stomach tightened. The baby was coming. Panic shot through her. She looked around, desperate for help, but the streets were empty. Lightning flashed across the sky as she spotted an old, abandoned shelter near the bus stop. She dragged herself there, breathing hard, clutching her belly, praying for strength. Hours passed. The storm roared louder, but inside that cold shelter, a soft cry finally broke through the thunder. Amara held her newborn son against her chest, wrapping him in her torn shawl. She looked down at his tiny face and whispered, voice shaking, "I'll call you Zion because you're my promise in the storm." As the rain poured harder, she gazed toward the dark sky and murmured, "One day, Cabello will see what he threw away." And in that moment, soaked and shivering, a new kind of fire lit inside her, not anger but determination. The storm hadn't destroyed her. It had just begun to shape her. The next morning, Amara woke up in the church shelter with little Zion asleep beside her. The rain had stopped, but her storm wasn't over yet. She had nothing, no home, no family, no money. But she still had her child, and that was enough reason to keep breathing. Sister Nandi, one of the churchwomen, noticed her sitting quietly after the service. She walked over with a gentle smile and said, "You look tired, my dear. Come help us in the kitchen." That small act of kindness changed everything. Within days, the church found her a small room to stay in, and Sister Nandi helped her get a cleaning job at nearby offices. It wasn't much, but it was honest work. Every morning before sunrise, Amara would strap baby Zion to her back and walk miles to the office blocks. She cleaned floors, scrubbed toilets, and washed piles of laundry until her hands cracked. Some nights she'd go to bed hungry so her baby could have milk. But every morning she looked at herself in the mirror, tired eyes, aching body, and whispered, "I'm not weak. I'm rebuilding." Slowly things began to shift. She saved every coin she could, tucking away little bits of hope in an old tin box under her bed. She started cooking for a few workers during lunch breaks, simple home meals like pap, stew, and jollof rice. Her food tasted like comfort, like love cooked through pain, and soon people started lining up. "Who made this jollof? It tastes like home," they'd say. Encouraged, she borrowed an old stove from the church and began selling food right outside the factory gates. Every morning, the air filled with the smell of fried plantains and spicy stew. Workers came running before their shifts, shouting, "Amara, 2 plates, please." It became her new rhythm: cook, serve, clean, repeat. Life was still hard. There were days she wanted to give up, especially when it rained and her small stove nearly drowned in the mud. But then she'd look at Zion sleeping beside her, his tiny hand gripping hers, and remember why she started. She told herself, rain doesn't drown seeds. It helps them grow. Month by month, her little food stand became the heart of the neighborhood. People didn't just come for food. They came for her smile, her story, her quiet strength. She was no longer just the woman who'd been thrown out in the rain. She was becoming the woman who rose from it. And one evening, as she packed up her pots and counted the coins she had earned, Amara looked at the sky turning pink with sunset and whispered, "Hope doesn't come fast, but it's coming." In that moment, with the smell of jollof rice still in the air and her baby giggling beside her, she didn't see poverty anymore. She saw the beginning of something powerful, a seed planted in the storm, finally beginning to grow. One sunny afternoon, Amara was busy serving lunch at her food stand outside the factory. The smell of her spicy jollof rice filled the air, drawing people in like a magnet. She worked quickly, spooning food into containers while Zion played nearby with an old toy truck. Among the crowd that day was a man she had never seen before, tall, neatly dressed, with kind eyes. He waited patiently in line and finally ordered, "1 plate of jollof rice and grilled chicken, please." When he took his first bite, he stopped mid-chew. This is incredible," he said, looking up in surprise. "Who cooked this?" Amara smiled shyly and said, "It's just me. I cook everything myself." He introduced himself as Thulani, a business consultant who helped small vendors grow. He told her her food was not just tasty, it had heart. "You've got something special here, Amara," he said, packing another container to take home. "You just don't see it yet." Over the next few weeks, Thulani kept coming back. He started giving her small tips, like how to keep her food packaging clean and consistent, and how to write her name clearly on each container. He even helped her design a simple paper label with a logo. When she saw her name printed, Amara's Kitchen, she cried quietly that night. For the first time, she saw herself not as a survivor, but as a businesswoman. One afternoon, Thulani said, "You need to make this official. Register your business." Amara hesitated. "I'm just a street vendor, Thulani. That's for big companies." He smiled and said, "So become one." And she did. Together they filled out the forms, registered the name, and after days of thinking, Amara decided to call it Rainborn Kitchen. "Because I was born in the rain," she said softly, "and I'm still rising." With Thulani's help, she upgraded from her little street stand to a food truck. She started selling at community events, school fairs, and weekend markets. Her line was always the longest. People loved her story just as much as her food. Newspapers began writing about the woman who turned her pain into flavor. As her brand grew, so did her confidence. She hired 2 women from the church to help with cooking and delivery. Every day felt like a small miracle. And when her jollof rice finally made it onto the shelves of local supermarkets, packaged in bright blue boxes with her logo, Amara stood in front of the display, tears in her eyes. Each box carried her words printed proudly at the bottom: "Born in the rain, built to rise." Shoppers passed by, picking up the boxes without knowing the story behind them, the story of a woman who had once stood alone in a storm but chose not to drown. She had turned her pain into purpose, and her food carried that strength in every bite. It all started one Saturday afternoon when Amara was invited to speak at a small women's empowerment event in Gaborone. She wasn't famous yet, just a hard-working mother running her growing business, Rainborn Kitchen. But when she stepped onto that small stage, holding the microphone with trembling hands, something powerful happened. She shared her story, how she was thrown out in the rain, how she gave birth under a leaking shelter, and how she built a new life with nothing but courage and cooking pots. Her voice broke several times, but she kept going. "I was told I was worthless," she said, "but the same rain that tried to drown me became the water that helped me grow." The crowd was silent, some wiping their tears. In the audience was a young journalist named Naledi. She was so moved that she wrote an article that night titled, "The Woman Who Rose from the Storm," spread like wildfire. Within days, Amara's story was everywhere, on Facebook, radio, and even national news. Videos of her speech were shared thousands of times. People were inspired, writing things like, "If Amara can rise, so can we." Suddenly, Amara was being invited to TV shows and conferences. She received calls from women's groups across Africa asking her to speak. The government even offered her a small business grant to expand Rainborn Kitchen. Orders poured in from all over the country. Her once tiny brand had become a symbol of strength and hope. One morning, as she watched her team pack food boxes stamped "Born in the Rain, built to rise," she smiled and whispered, "We did it, Zion." Her little boy, now 6 years old, grinned back proudly, saying, "Mommy, you're on TV again." But miles away, Cabello's life was falling apart. His company had started losing clients. His workers complained, his partners pulled out, and his debts piled up. The same pride that once made him cruel to Amara now blinded him in business. He shouted at employees, ignored advice, and spent more time blaming others than fixing problems. Eventually, the company collapsed. He lost the house, the fancy cars, the respect of everyone who once praised him. Friends stopped answering his calls. He moved into a small apartment, bitter and alone. One afternoon, while walking down the main highway, he saw something that made his heart stop. Across the road stood a giant billboard. Bright, beautiful, impossible to miss. It was Amara. She was smiling confidently beside her signature dish, her company name shining above her head. Rain-born Kitchen. Taste the strength of survival. He froze, staring at it in disbelief. The same woman he once called a burden was now the face of success. The world celebrated her, and had forgotten him. His throat tightened as he whispered her name. Amara. For the first time in years, he realized what he'd truly lost. Not just a wife, but a woman who had turned pain into power. And as cars rushed by and the wind carried her slogan through the air, Cabello finally understood. She hadn't just survived the storm. She had become it. Cabello wandered through town that morning with heavy steps and an empty wallet. His once proud shoulders were now hunched, his suit worn and faded. Life had not been kind to him since his business crashed. The friends who once praised him now crossed the street when they saw him. He'd gone from driving luxury cars to begging for small jobs that no one wanted to give him. Every door that opened to him before was now firmly shut. As he walked along the busy highway, lost in thought, something suddenly caught his eye. He stopped. His breath hitched. There, towering above the traffic, was a giant billboard, bright, bold, and impossible to ignore. At the center of it was Amara. Her face glowed with confidence and pride, her smile warm and powerful. The words beside her read, "Rain-born Kitchen. Taste the strength of survival." Cabello just stood there, frozen. His mouth went dry. For a long moment he couldn't move. That name, Rain-born Kitchen. He'd heard it on the radio and seen it on supermarket boxes but never imagined it belonged to her. His Amara. The woman he'd thrown out in the rain, barefoot, pregnant and crying. "Amara," he whispered under his breath, his voice trembling. It can't be. But it was. The same woman he once mocked for being useless was now a national success story. The same woman he'd left with nothing was now everywhere. On billboards, in magazines, on TV. The city that once pitied her now celebrated her. As he stared up at her radiant face, memories came rushing back. Her tears that night, her pleas for him to open the door, the thunder roaring as he turned away. And now, years later, she was standing taller than he ever could. He sank onto a nearby bench, his hands shaking. Around him, people were talking excitedly about her new award. "Did you hear?" one woman said to her friend. "The First Lady is honoring Amara Moyo next week for inspiring women all across Africa." Cabello's heart twisted. The First Lady, his ex-wife, the woman he called a burden, was now being celebrated by the highest people in the country. He wanted to be proud, but shame swallowed him whole. Every cruel word he had ever thrown at her came back like echoes. As buses passed by, splashing puddles at his feet, Cabello wiped his face. He didn't even realize he was crying. He whispered again, "You really did it, didn't you, Amara?" He had spent years thinking success was about money, power, and pride, but now he understood. True power was what Amara had found, the strength to rise after being broken. He looked up at her billboard one last time. The sunlight hit her face just right, and for a moment, it almost felt like she was looking straight at him, not with anger but with peace. And that hurt more than anything else. Because Cabello finally knew, the woman he threw away had become unstoppable. It was a quiet evening when Amara's phone rang. She almost didn't pick up because she was busy helping Zion with his homework. But when she answered, her whole world changed. The voice on the other end said warmly, "Mrs. Moyo, congratulations. You've been chosen to receive the National Courage Award." Amara froze. For a second she couldn't breathe. "Me?" she asked softly. "Are you sure?" The caller laughed. "Yes, you. Your story has inspired millions across Africa. The ceremony will be live on national television next week." When she hung up, she sat there in silence, staring at the phone. Then tears filled her eyes. Zion ran over, worried. "Mommy, what happened?" She hugged him tight and whispered, "Nothing bad, my boy. Just something beautiful." The next few days were a blur. She got calls from journalists. messages from women thanking her for giving them hope, and invitations from charities. But most of all, she prepared her speech. She wanted every word to matter. Late at night, she practiced in front of the mirror, whispering the lines over and over. "This is for all women who've been left in the rain," she said to her reflection. "Because the rain doesn't just fall, it teaches you how to rise." The night of the ceremony arrived. The event hall sparkled with lights, and cameras flashed everywhere. Amara walked the red carpet in a simple blue dress, elegant but humble, just like her. When her name was announced, the whole room stood up and clapped. The sound was thunderous. She walked to the stage, her heart racing, her palms trembling. Standing at the podium, she took a deep breath and looked at the audience. Leaders, celebrities, journalists, women from every walk of life. Then she began. "There was a time," she said softly, "when I had nothing but rain and pain. I was told I was nothing. I was left alone, scared and cold. But today I stand here because the rain that tried to drown me became the water that grew me." The crowd went silent for a moment, then erupted into applause. People were on their feet, cheering, crying, clapping. Some held their hearts. Others filmed her words, which would go viral within hours. Across the country, millions watched the broadcast live, feeling every word she spoke. And in a small, dim tavern on the edge of town, Cabello was one of them. He sat hunched over a cracked wooden table, surrounded by noise and laughter he couldn't hear. His eyes were fixed on the tiny TV above the counter. There she was, Amara, standing tall under bright lights, her smile glowing with peace and pride. As she said those words, "The rain that drowned me became the water that grew me," Cabello felt tears streaming down his face. He didn't even try to stop them. For the first time, he saw her not as the woman he once left, but as the woman she was always meant to be. When the crowd roared on TV and Amara raised her award high, Cabello whispered through his tears, "You really did it, Amara." And somewhere deep inside, he finally understood. Her strength wasn't revenge. It was rebirth. It had been almost a year since Amara won the National Courage Award. Her foundation, the Rainborn Project, had grown into something powerful. A safe space for single mothers, homeless women, and girls looking for second chances. That day, she was hosting a charity event in Gaborone. Music, laughter, food, and stories of hope filled the air. She moved through the crowd with her usual calm smile, greeting guests and hugging women whose lives her program had changed. Then she saw him. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. But as the crowd shifted, there he was, Cabello, standing quietly at the edge of the event, his clothes wrinkled, his face thinner, his eyes heavy with shame. The man who once walked with arrogance now looked smaller, broken by time and regret. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world went silent. Cabello took a shaky step forward, then another. Before anyone could react, he dropped to his knees in front of her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the music seemed to fade. He looked up at her, voice trembling, and said, "Amara, I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need to say it, I'm sorry." Amara stood still, her heart steady but heavy. The memories flashed in her mind. The thunderstorm, the slammed door, the cries of baby Zion, the nights she went hungry. For a long moment, she didn't say a word. Everyone watched, waiting for her reaction. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but powerful. "Cabello," she said, "you didn't break me. You built the woman who no longer needs you." The crowd went silent again. He lowered his head, tears dripping onto the ground. Amara bent slightly, reaching out her hand to help him up, not out of love but out of grace. He hesitated, then took her hand. She pulled him gently to his feet. "Stand," she said quietly. "You've already done enough kneeling." He nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "You really became everything I never believed you could," he whispered. Amara gave a faint smile. "No, Cabello. I became everything you tried to destroy." She turned and walked away, the hem of her long white dress brushing against the grass, her head held high. The audience broke into quiet applause, not for drama, but for the beauty of her strength. Cabello stood there for a long time, watching her walk toward the stage to greet more guests, to continue her mission to shine. He realized then that forgiveness didn't always mean going back. Sometimes it just meant setting yourself free and letting the other person see what they lost. As Amara took the microphone to thank everyone for their support, the wind picked up and a soft drizzle began to fall. She looked up, smiling at the sky. The rain had returned, not as pain but as a blessing. And somewhere behind her, Cabello whispered, "She really rose from the storm." Amara's dream had finally turned into something bigger than herself. After everything she went through, the storm, the rejection, the humiliation, she decided no woman should ever feel that kind of pain alone again. That's how the Rainborn Foundation was born. It started small, just Amara and a few women working out of an old community hall. But soon donations began to pour in. Her story had touched so many hearts that people wanted to help her mission grow. Within a year, Amara was employing over 200 women, single mothers, widows, and women who had once been homeless. She taught them how to cook, how to start small businesses, how to believe in themselves again. Many came to her with tears in their eyes, broken and hopeless. But Amara would hold their hands and say, "You are not broken. You are being rebuilt." Her slogan, printed on every apron and every delivery van, read, "The rain made us strong." Every morning she would walk through the kitchen, now a buzzing hub of laughter, songs, and the smell of fresh bread, and feel tears of gratitude. The same rain that once drenched her in pain had become the symbol of her power. These women weren't victims anymore. They were builders, mothers, fighters, and leaders. Meanwhile, her son Zion was growing fast. He would sit in the office corner after school, doing homework while watching his mother lead meetings and motivate her team. One day, during an interview for a TV special, a reporter asked him, "Who inspires you the most?" Zion smiled, looked at his mother and said, "My mom is my hero. She showed me that strength doesn't shout, it builds." That line went viral across social media. People everywhere shared his words with hashtags like #RainbornStrength and #Amara the Stormbreaker. Amara's foundation began receiving global attention, invitations to collaborate, to speak, to mentor. She had become more than a success story. She had become a movement. And though she had every reason to be bitter, Amara chose grace. When reporters asked if she had forgiven her ex-husband, she simply smiled and said, "The rain already washed away the anger. I'm too busy growing flowers." Her mission wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about transformation. The same rain that once made her cry had watered an entire generation of women who refused to be silent, who refused to give up. Amara's name became a symbol of rebirth, hope, and unstoppable strength. She didn't just rebuild her life, she rewrote what womanhood meant in her world. Rain hadn't ruined her. It revealed her power. It was supposed to be just another TV interview, another chance for Amara to share her journey and talk about her foundation. The show was called Heart of a Nation, one of the most popular programs in Africa. Amara arrived in her elegant white dress, her signature silver bracelet glimmering under the lights. She smiled warmly at the host, unaware that the producers had planned something that would leave millions speechless. The interview began with the usual questions, about her rise from struggle, her charity work, and how she inspired so many women. The audience clapped and cheered every time she spoke. Her words carried a quiet power, soft yet unshakable. Then, halfway through the show, the host smiled mysteriously and said, "Amara, today we have a very special surprise guest for you." Amara blinked, a little confused. Before she could ask anything, the studio doors opened, and in walked Cabello. The audience gasped. Cameras zoomed in on her face. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. He looked completely different, thinner, older, humbled. Gone was the proud man who once shouted at her in the rain. He walked slowly toward her, clutching a small piece of paper in his shaking hands. "Amara," he began softly, his voice trembling, "I don't deserve to stand here, but I had to. I came here not to ask for anything, only to thank the woman I once destroyed." The studio fell silent. Even the host didn't speak. Cabello's eyes filled with tears as he continued, "You taught me more by leaving than I ever learned by winning. You showed me what real strength looks like. You turned the storm I caused into something beautiful." The audience erupted in emotion, some crying, others applauding. Amara sat still, her heart pounding. She didn't cry. She didn't scold him. Instead, she stood, walked over, and gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "I forgave you long ago," she said quietly, "because holding on to pain would have kept me in the same storm. I chose peace." Her words broke the silence like sunlight after rain. The crowd stood up in applause, a thunderous standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Cabello lowered his head in gratitude, then stepped back as Amara turned to the audience with a calm smile. That moment went viral across Africa. Clips flooded social media with captions like "Grace in Motion" and "The Woman Who Forgave the Storm." People couldn't stop talking about her calmness, her dignity, and the way she turned pain into power without a trace of hate. By the next morning, Amara's photo, her serene smile beside her broken ex-husband, was on every major news site. She had become more than an inspiration. She had become a symbol, not of revenge, but of redemption, grace, and unstoppable strength. Years later, Amara stood on the biggest stage of her life, a stadium filled with thousands of people from across the country. Bright lights shone down on her as she held Zion's hand tightly. He was a young man now, tall and proud, the same boy who once cried in her arms under the cold rain. Behind them, a massive screen glowed with the image of a single raindrop falling, then turning into a powerful wave. The crowd grew silent as Amara stepped up to the microphone. Her voice was steady, filled with emotion. "Rain doesn't destroy the ground," she said, pausing as her eyes glistened. "It nourishes it. What was meant to drown you can help you grow, if you let it." The audience erupted into cheers. Some were crying, some shouting her name, others just standing in awe. Cameras flashed everywhere, capturing the woman who once had nothing, now standing as a symbol of hope. Zion smiled beside her, whispering, "You did it, Mom." She smiled back and said softly, "No, we did." Somewhere in the crowd, hidden among thousands, Cabello stood silently. His eyes were wet as he clapped, not with envy, but with respect. He knew she had risen far beyond his reach, not just in success but in peace. She wasn't his pain anymore. She was his lesson. As music filled the air, Amara walked off stage, the screen behind her showing gentle rain falling over blooming flowers. She lifted her face to the sky, letting the drops touch her skin. Her head was high, her heart finally healed. Moral: you can't stop the storm, but you can become the thunder that follows.